Beans to Brews. What is Beans to Brews? Well, it's all about coffee. From the farm where it's grown to the roaster, and then from the roaster to the coffee shops and into your homes or into your car or wherever you're enjoying some really great coffee. So Beans to Brews, a small group of friends talking all about coffee. If you like coffee, you found a great place to find out more about it. We're all learning together. So stay with us from Apostolic Coffee Shop in Radcliffe, Kentucky. We are just going to make several podcast episodes of Beans to Brews. All right, welcome back to Beans to Brews. In our last session, we learned about the incredible journey that coffee has from being planted, taking 3 to 5 years to even produce any coffee fruit, it having to be protected from pests and animals and pesticides and all things that could destroy it or weaken the crop. But we also then talked about different places that you can get coffee, some of the part of the coffee belt of the world. We talked about a lot of stuff that had to do with us getting a live coffee plant. We had a live coffee plant here with us, and we showed basically the coffee cherry, or what some people call the coffee berry, the inside of it. And we talked about a little bit of what all that entails. But today we want to talk about how that part gets to our cup, because there's a whole process, as in the first 3 to 5 years, just to get the coffee. Then when the coffee starts being harvested and we start picking that coffee, how do those raw coffee cherries transform into roasted beans and fill our cups, right? So let's talk about that fascinating process tonight. Some of the things that we talked about were the ideal growing conditions that coffee needed, and the labor-intensive harvesting process. Literally, people risk life and limb to pick real great coffee beans. You can go a lot of places. They use agitators. In these big farms, they'll use agitators and they'll shake the trees, and then all of the coffee fall, whether it's ripe or overripe or underripe. And then scoops will come through and pick it all up in big baskets, and then it all goes in together. And so you don't know what kind of beans you're going to have when the whole batch comes out. But where we like to get our coffee at our coffee shop is we like to go with farms that we have relationships with, that our roasters have relationships with, and they're all picked by hand, and they're picked only when they're ripe. They're not picked just randomly. So we get great coffee because it's picked when it's ripe, and then it's processed well. So harvesting is just the beginning. The true science, the true alchemy of coffee really starts when you get to the processing and the roasting and the brewing, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So what's the big deal? Why can't you just go out and get some coffee and just, make it happen? Well, each stage changes the flavor profile. It impacts the quality of the cup that you end up with, and so getting a better understanding and really a better appreciation for this journey, it helps us appreciate all that goes into the cup of coffee that we drink. And really, there's a lot of care and there's a lot of skill behind every sip that we take. So, all right, so we're going to talk about processing coffee beans. And we had Steph do some research on processing coffee beans. So what did you learn, Steph?
All right, good. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 processes. The first one is washed, and this is also known as the wet process, and it's the most common way to process coffee beans. So the ripe cherries are selectively picked and then sent through a depulping machine to remove the outer skin and part of the mucilage. The beans are then placed in fermentation tanks filled with water for 12 to 48 hours, which helps break down the remaining mucilage, making it easier to wash off. They are then washed with clean water, which ensures a clean and bright flavor in the final cup. The beans are dried for 7 to 15 days before they're milled and sorted. And this process highlights the bean's natural acidity, clarity, and often has citrus, berry, or floral characteristics. I think Inkwell is an example.
So, yeah, Inkwell is our house blend, and that's that is washed.
So the second one is natural, which is known as the dry process and is the oldest method. This is where you dry the whole coffee cherry before hulling them. Cherries are picked or mechanically harvested and are then sorted to remove unripe, overripe, defective, and they do this by floating them in water. So the bad cherries will float and the good ones will sink to the bottom. After they're sorted, they are spread out to dry, which can take 2 to 6 weeks, depending on the climate. So it's kind of a long process. Once the cherries reach ideal moisture level of 10 to 12%, the dried out layers are mechanically removed. Beans are sorted by size, weight, and defect, and then packed. This process often results in a fruitier, sweeter, and more bold flavor. Common tasting notes include berry, tropical fruit, and wine-like characteristics. The last is honey, and this is a hybrid between washed and natural.
Yeah.
It involves removing the coffee cherry skin but leaving some of the mucilage, which has a honey-like texture to it, on the bean while drying. The amount of mucilage left over will determine the type of honey process. So there's white honey, yellow honey, red honey, and black honey. The white honey has very little mucilage left to it. The yellow honey is slightly more mucilage, and that produces a mild sweetness. The red honey is a moderate amount of mucilage, producing a richer body and sweetness. And then the black honey, which is the most mucilage left, requiring careful drying and resulting in intense sweetness and complexity. Common notes include caramel, stone fruit, and floral.
Yeah. And a lot of times when you go and you look at a bag of coffee that you're purchasing, especially if it's from a local coffee shop or a local coffee roaster, it'll have the process on there of how it was, how those beans were processed. And basically what Steph was talking about is, they take the different processes. They take the coffee cherry itself, which is this red, when it's ripe, it's supposed to look similar to this. And then inside is, you kind of see the different layers of it. But it's really, it's getting to the bean itself, getting to, what we look at. And what you see is the mucilage. You'll see all that, and they got to get the processes, whatever process they're using, they're trying to get down to the bottom, which is obviously this bean. But in order to do that, there's 2 layers, the 3 layers actually, because there's the outer layer, and then there's the mucilage, and then there's the hull or the shell that they have to then get off. And the different processes are different ways to get to this. Various people will tell you that just depending on what country, what farm, what area that you're in, some processes are mainly used because the other processes don't work as quick or they're not as efficient. But there are some farms in certain places that they'll use all 3 processes just in different stages. But yeah, so that's what they're trying to get to is this green coffee bean, which is then that's what gets shipped. So once they have gone through, they've got the best green beans, they ship them to wherever they are going. And Rachel's going to talk to us about the roasting process.
Yeah. So actually, that green bean that you see is essentially a raw coffee bean before it's been processed or cooked or roasted so you can make good coffee. But you have different types of coffee. Most people hear these terms like light, medium, dark roast. And the reason they have those names is when you roast your coffee, it's literally cooking it, and you get a light bean from cooking it for less time. The longer you cook it, the darker it's going to get. So you're going to get your dark roast. So I prefer dark roast. And I prefer that because the longer you cook a bean, the darker it gets, the less acidity it has. And those aren't my favorite flavors. And actually, a lot of people prefer less acidity to their coffee. So something I learned was, and a common misconception too, is people think that, a dark roast means I'm getting more caffeine. I'm gonna have this like dark coffee. It's gonna give me all this caffeine. When that's not the case. Actually, a lighter roast is gonna give you just a little bit more, but different flavor. And then I also learned they're actually not that big of a difference in caffeine content. So really, when you're roasting your coffee for a light, medium, or dark, you're doing it for the flavor. It's not for the caffeine content. You're only going to get about 10 milligram difference in a light and a dark roast. So what you want to do is think about the flavors you like, which kind of go back to what Steph was saying about the high acidity and like the darker, all that. But the longer you cook it, the less acidity. You're going to have kind of a more chocolatey, caramel flavors versus those other light roasts that have, cherry notes or citrusy notes like orange and all that. So, yeah. And actually, I was reading a lot of people prefer a dark roast because they tend to taste the same. Versus, because you're cooking that coffee, it's taking away a lot of those flavor profiles that you get when you don't cook the coffee too long. So if you're looking for like unique flavors or to try different coffee, I suggest going with like a light roast or a medium because you're going to get different flavor profiles. If you're like, oh, I just want coffee, I don't want it to be anything weird, or then go with a dark roast because they're probably going to taste like something you've already had before.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So if the green bean is the most caffeine and the dark roast is obviously the least caffeinated, okay, how do we get decaf beans?
I don't know. I'm hoping you do.
So there, yes. Well, I do know, but I think that's something good for us. Maybe we'll talk about it too in a future podcast episode. But there are different processes to extracting the majority of the caffeine out of the coffee bean. And that's why a lot of people don't like decaf. That's why decaf doesn't respond as well for espresso and different things like that. And it has a lot to do with the processes that they use to extract most of the caffeine out of the bean.
Yeah, because when you look at like our decaf beans, they're not lighter necessarily. Right. They look almost similar.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just so most is the different process that are used, and the more expensive the process, the more expensive your bean is going to be whenever you get decaf beans. But all right, and a lot of times, and I think you guys both brought this out, but a lot of times the flavor profile has a lot to do with where did the bean come from. Like what region was it grown in? How much shade did it get? How much moisture was in the soil? And that all, has a lot to do with it. Have you guys ever noticed when you bought a bag of beans what the process was? Like if it was washed or if it was natural?
I just didn't know what it meant.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Have you ever seen one that's honey? Yeah. So honey is it's a really different way. It's like she was saying, it's the hybrid way. A lot of people that like their coffee naturally sweeter and not having to add sugar or whatever, they like the honey process because your bean is naturally sweeter. You usually don't have to use any kind of sweetener, and if you do, you don't have to use as much. So anyways, just for those of you who like black coffee, but you don't like to drink black coffee without any sugar, I would suggest trying some honey processed
You have that here?
black coffee. We don't have Quills does not usually do a lot of honey process, but on my travels I have gotten some. I have some from Costa Rica in my house. So all right, let's talk about the roasting process. Why should we roast coffee? Well, because green beans are for roasting. And if we want to have great coffee, then we have to learn how to roast them. So there is such a science to roasting coffee. It's not just like, some people think, just put, and I've had people actually say, it's not that big a deal. Just get a popcorn machine and put them in there. And if you time everything out, if you know exactly what you're doing, you can use a pot on the stove.
Something I learned when this video I watched was the guy was like, you can make it at home, but if you ever seen a coffee roasting machine. It's constantly moving.
Yeah.
Versus if you're just baking it on a pan, it's not going to have that movement.
Right.
It's not going to have that cook evenly, and you're not going to get the flavor that you're looking for.
I watched somebody do some in like a cast iron skillet, and they were like stirring the whole time, and I was like, that's I'm not there yet. But there's different stages of roasting. There's the drying stage, which it's basically getting all the moisture out of the. It's kind of like, have you ever tried to start a fire with wet wood? That's kind of like if you're trying to roast your coffee bean and there's a lot of moisture in the beans, it's going to take longer. It's not going to come out as good. And so then there's the browning stage after the drying stage, which chemical reactions develop the complex flavors and aromas. And so it's kind of like where does this bean need to get roasted to? If you under roast it, it's probably going to be a little too acidic. It's going to be sharp to your tongue, and then it's not going to taste as good. If you get it to that range, that sweet spot of this is where it needs to be roasted to, then that's where you want to drink it at. But if you go over that, and it's like a certain large company tends to do that a lot, they over roast their bean, and so then it becomes bitter, and it's just has a kind of a burnt flavor to it. So that browning stage is very important. And then there's, the development stage, which helps it, whether it's going to be light, medium, or dark. It's kind of like it may be the matter of seconds, or it may be a matter of minutes that it's in that process. So that development stage is very important. So a light roast, like Rachel says, bright, acidic, it's fruity. If it has special notes, you'll really pull it out in a light roast. That's why light roasts are popular for people who like tasting all kinds of different coffees or fruits in their coffees. I have a good friend that he likes blueberry notes in his coffee, and so any coffee that he can find from wherever, he'll try to find blueberry notes. Medium roast is going to be a balanced kind of roast. It's going to be a little bit more nutty and sweet. You're gonna taste that nuttiness in the flavor profiles, but then if you take it into a dark roast, it's going to be bolder. It's going to be smokier. A lot of times people describe it as like chocolatey, and that's what a lot of people like the closeness of the cocoa bean and the coffee bean, and that's where you get it when it gets to be a dark roast. So we were going to try to do some different, like smelling some coffee beans. We're actually going to try to do that in a future episode. But let me ask you guys, what Rachel already told us she prefers dark roast. What roast level do you prefer? Do you know? Anybody?
I prefer medium.
Medium? Yeah.
Dark.
Dark?
Definitely dark.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah. It depends on where it came from and who roasted it and how well it's roasted. I like medium most of the time, but
That's what I was gonna say.
yeah,
I tend to be a light roaster.
dark. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
every roaster is different too. Like they have their,
Yeah.
if you're getting from a small roaster or whatever, they have their own preference.
Right.
That they're watching their coffee come out.
Yeah.
Their perfect little.
Yeah, because I've had some dark roasts that I really like, but on the average, just from any like random roaster, most times I don't like dark. Most times I would prefer light or medium, and I can usually find a light or medium that I like if they're a decent roaster. But if it's a really good roaster and they've roasted it, really well, I like a dark roast in that kind of setting. But I just don't. I'm not really into the bitter kind of smoky like tobacco tones. I'm not as big on that because, and honestly, here's why. Because whenever I was growing up, that's really all we had. It was like, that was it, and you just put sugar and milk in it, and that was away you went.
That's why so many people I think prefer that
Yeah.
too, because it's just like what they're used to.
Yeah, but then so what turned me on to coffee was the medium roast that I had black that was so smooth. I was like, that's not even like coffee. That's amazing, and that changed my perspective of what black coffee was supposed to be, and has kind of further pressed me into like, okay, coffee can have different flavors, depending on where it's from, depending on how it's roasted, and all the things that we've already discussed. So, yeah, so everybody has a little bit different flavor profile. So just because your preference is dark or light or medium or, whatever, you may find that certain things that you want to put in your coffee or put with your coffee change the flavor profiles of that. And I always say it like this: everybody has their own flavor profile. So, really, if coffee tastes good to you and you think that's what, coffee should taste good. If it's not tasting good, you can add something to it. You can do something, but coffee should be something that you like. If you don't like it, then try some tea. But everybody has a different flavor profile. So just because I think a certain roast is good, or I think a certain bean that we get is good, that may not translate to everybody. There are some, and I think the house blend that we use, Inkwell, is a medium roast. There's not very many people that don't like that. It's something that I think fits a lot of people, but you might not like it, but you might like something else. So just have a fun adventure and try several. All right, we have all the different types of roasts. We've talked about the different ways to harvest and then process. And now I think I want us to talk a little bit about brewing. And what we'll probably do is in our next episode, I think we're going to talk about just the best home brewing methods. We're going to talk about as many as we can talk about. We'll all take a different one and kind of describe it and give you instructions, give you ratios. You'll probably want to invest in a little kitchen scale so that you can measure stuff out. But yeah, we're going to have a good time with that. But today, I prepared a pour-over, a Chemex pour-over. One of my favorite ways to have coffee is through a Chemex. Chemex it's basically like an hourglass pitcher. It's glass. It's got the reason it's got kind of like a gooseneck form is so that you can hold onto it and pour it easier. Also, you sit the filter in the top. There's like a heavy-duty filter. You can get bleached or unbleached paper filters, similar to what you would put in like a drip brewer, but they're folded. And so you're always going to take that folded filter. You'll pull the one side out, which is like one ply, and then the three ply, it's going to go where the spout is so that it doesn't cave in. You rinse that filter in hot water. And then you're going to make sure that if you're doing, coffee, you want to make sure your ratio is like 1 to 15, so 1 part coffee to 15 parts water. So for a liter pitcher of Chemex, you're going to make maybe 6 cups or 3 cups or 4 cups, just depending on what you're doing. There's different sizes of Chemex. There's different sizes of filters, so kind of got to pay attention to that. But just remember 1 part to 15. So like for what I did tonight, I did 60 grams of coffee, and I ground 60 grams of coffee, a medium, which is like a sea salt. So kind of if you have you also, I want to mention, you'll want to have a burr grinder, because if you don't have a burr grinder, you can't adjust how fine or how coarse your grind is. But you'll want to have it just set on medium. And like I said, 1 to 15, so 60 and then 900 grams of water. And you'll heat that water up to in between 195 and 205. My sweet spot that I like is about 202, 203. But definitely you want to have it, if you get it too hot, like if you're boiling water on the stove, you'll want to let it, just pull it off the burner and just let it sit for about 30 seconds before you pour it over. You'll want to pour it in outward circles, and you're going to do that without trying to not hit the outside walls of your filter. You want to try to do the best you can to keep it. Basically, your first pour should take you about 30 to 45 seconds. You're basically just trying to wet all the beans, and it's called the bloom, and it's where it kind of like foams up and it looks really pretty. Kind of looks like flour, coffee flour. It's like, but it's really cool. And then after that, and somebody said, "Oh, how much do I pour in the first pour?" You're going to pour whatever your coffee was. If you're measuring it and you have it sitting on a scale, and say your coffee was 60 grams, you're going to want to pour at least 120 grams of water over that first pour, and then you'll just keep going out and around, keep doing your circles after you let it sit for 30 seconds, kind of soak down in and really bring out those flavors. Then you're going to pour it, continue your pour to your 900 grams. And the best thing to do is always make sure that I think I mentioned rinse that filter before you start in hot water, because you want to get off any particles that might have been on there, any dust or any anything that might have been in that filter. So you just kind of rinse that out. You discard that water, and then you pour your ground coffee in there. You kind of shake it around to level it out so that it's not like real high on one side and real low on the other. And then enjoy your coffee. You'll be able to taste the notes better, especially if it's a lighter or medium roast. You'll be able to taste the notes better if you have it in a Chemex. It's my favorite way. How about you guys? What's your favorite way to have coffee?
I want it from an espresso machine.
From an espresso machine. Yeah, that's good. Get that pressure in there.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of pressure,
Yes.
French press.
French press.
Actually,
pressure.
So that's like manual pressure.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the fun part.
Yeah. And it's not. So I have a little gadget that I'm going to bring. I can take it on a plane with me, which is incredible. But I would have had to have ground my coffee first, so I don't usually do it on a plane. But it's literally about this big, and it's called a final press, and it's like a little metal cylinder with a lot of little tiny holes in it, and you put your coffee grinds in it, and then you screw on the top and you sit it down into your hot water and let it sit for about 4 to 5 minutes. And then just like your French press, you plunge it and then you kind of just stir it around, and it makes great coffee. It's awesome.
You love coffee when you're bringing little tools on the plane.
That's right. When you're taking it, because the thing is, like, sometimes I travel places and they don't have good coffee, or I don't have the time to go find the good coffee in that area, and so I'll just bring a little bit of coffee with me so that I know that I won't, because I'm an addict, and I want to make sure that I have what I need clearly.
The first
Clearly,
time.
I'm an addict.
half about it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Somebody said, "You light up when you talk about coffee." I'm like, I love coffee. Like it's my jam, right? What about you, Steph?
I would say it's probably a toss up between espresso and drip. Like, drip is
Yeah.
my go-to. It really is.
Yeah,
It's easy.
nice, nice. And drip is what you're going to find practically everywhere.
Yeah.
So and drip coffee, it can be the best, really, if you just want to drink coffee all day. It's good. Anybody else? Favorite kinds? Brewing methods?
I like a Chemex.
All right, Chemex, And anything else that we haven't mentioned? Any other kinds that we haven't mentioned?
I like cold brew.
Cold brew, yeah. Cold brew's good. And less acidic. Easier on your stomach. Well, we will cover all these brewing methods and more in our next session. We're going to be talking about home brewing methods. We're going to try to describe, for a lot of people, they always ask me, so how do you make this, or how do you make that? Or one of my favorites is, I don't have an espresso machine, but I want to have espresso. I'm like, well, okay. They said, is there a way to do that? I'm like, yes. And it's called a mocha pot, and it's only about $8, so no big deal. Probably not as good as having it through a fancy espresso machine, but when you're in a pinch and you're trying to save money, it'll do. So, all right, we'll talk about those next time, and we'll try to do some live demonstrations of what we're doing. All right, so let me ask you guys this. What challenges have you faced so far in learning how to brew coffee? I know we had a few people, I won't mention any names, but we had a few people that didn't even like coffee, didn't even really drink coffee when they first started coming around. What was one of the challenges that you faced in learning about coffee?
Describing its characteristics to people.
Yeah, it's hard to describe something if you haven't really experienced it.
It says cherry on the bag. You do with that what you want.
Yeah.
Don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and sometimes people will see the flavor notes that other people taste, and they're like, so does it have this in the coffee? And it's like, no. But some people, that's what they taste in it. That's the flavors that they taste. So this is what I want you guys to do. it's going to be harder for some of you than others because some of you have tried every brewing method. But if you haven't, I want you to try a brewing method that you haven't tried this week. And try to learn about it, get to know a little bit about it, and see if you like it in a different method. So if you haven't tried an AeroPress or a French press or a Chemex or, God forbid you haven't tried drip, like that would be weird. I mean, I guess there'd be some people. But try coffee in a different, try to brew it in a different way this week and see what your experience is. But we're gonna explore coffee culture. We're going to talk about coffee, the role of community that coffee has. But I want us to just keep sharing, keep exploring, keep learning about coffee. And our next session, we will be talking about all these different home brewing methods. So bring your questions and we'll try to have some answers. We'll try to make you expert home brewers. And there's a lot of stuff that we still haven't talked about. I'm excited because we're gonna have some special guests pop in, and it's gonna be fun. So, anybody have any questions? What was the best thing that you got out of tonight that you learned from somebody else, or maybe you got it while you were studying your own processes? Yeah.
Because I've always seen washed or natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that meant.
Didn't know what it meant.
It's like, I'm glad you washed the beans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good to have washed beans.
Yeah.
Clean beans are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very excited to try the honey.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
Me too.
Definitely.
I think I have a bag.
Yeah.
Did you get me some from Costa Rica?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think I have a bag. Maybe we can try some of that next week. Be good. All right. Anybody else? Anything else you learned?
Don't put the finely ground grounds in the
In the Chemex.
Chemex.
Yeah.
Because you said that will.
It'll just pull up. It'll just be a bunch of water and it won't get through. Yep.
That's good to know.
And those grinders at Walmart, you can get a grinder that'll do it on different sizes.
Yeah, the burr grinder is important because if you get just like one of those Mr. Coffee grinders or something like that, and Mr. Coffee probably has a burr grinder too, but the conical burr grinder you'll be able to adjust your grind size. With some of the grinders, it's literally just like a blade that's like spinning around, and it almost burns your beans more than it like chops them like it's supposed to. When it's the burr grinder, the bean goes into like kind of like a what do they call that? A wheel, like a has the little burrs in it. I'm trying to think of the name. It's like what you see, like a machine wheel kind of thing, and it goes into these steel like burrs, and it grinds it just the specific
it's
size.
Not just a blade. It's like,
Right. It's
Like a gear.
It's
it's
crunchy.
yeah, like
It's
a gear.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like a gear, and the closer, so the finer you go, like if you're wanting to make espresso, the finer you go on that burr, the smaller your grinds are going to be. The further away that those burrs are from each other, the more coarse your grind is going to be.
Yeah.
Which depends on if you're making brewed coffee, if you're making pour over, if you're making espresso, all of them have different grind levels. So, all right, good. Well, we've learned a lot, and we still have a lot more to learn. It's a great coffee adventure, and if you like coffee, it's good. If you don't like coffee, you might by the time we get finished. So, thank you guys for being a part of this. Thank you for all the research, and we'll have a good time brewing at home, home brewing methods next time. All right, thank you. All right.
We should get you one.
Good job, guys.
Yay.
Take 3.